Well, the apostles asked Jesus to increase their faith, and then Jesus said a few things. I wonder how helpful you found them today. Our words about faith and trust and how we grow in our faith. They seem a bit thin. Jesus says, if you had faith the size of a mustard seed, we heard the mustard seed thing before, but then something about casting mulberry trees into the ocean. I don't know if that was the desired outcome that we were looking for. And then to be called worthless slaves, well, that doesn't seem very helpful. A couple weeks ago, we were watching Secondhand Lions with our grandson. I don't know if you know that movie. It came out many years ago with Robert Duvall and Michael Caine playing a bunch of bachelor uncles who were kind of old, crotchety old men who somehow didn't like to have anybody near them, and they owned this rambling, gigantic farm in Texas, and their idea of sport was if anybody tried to come to see them, they would shoot them. So that's how they were. And then a nephew, Walter, gets dumped off for the summer to live with them, and they're not quite sure what to do, and the story is about how they all kind of learn to grow together. It's an interesting story. But one of the things they do is they get a used lion, a secondhand lion, and they buy it, and they're going to let it off on their property, and I guess the intent was to hunt it. But when the lion got there, it stayed in its crate. It was old and used to being cooped up in cages, so it just kind of laid there. They sort of kept it as a pet. Eventually, it kind of began to wander and make a little lair for itself, and they would take care of it. And kind of a metaphor for these two old men trying to figure out who they were as they grew older. And there was this kind of, in the background, there's this mysterious story about how they got all their wealth and what they were doing with it. And apparently, when they were younger men, they were quite adventurous and soldiers of fortune throughout the world. And so, anyway, the story unfolds. Hub, played by Robert Duvall, he has a heart attack, goes to the hospital, and, he just bounces right back out of bed, and he wants to go home. And they, on their way home, they stop at this dive along the road, and they have some ribs, which is good, heart-healthy diet. And while they're enjoying that, a hot rod pulls up, and a bunch of young guys who want to cause troubles get out and start trying to irritate everybody. So Hub takes them on, and he beats them all up and throws them back in their hot rod, drives back to his house and feeds them steak, and then he gives them a speech about how to be a man. Later on, he gives the same speech to Walter, and I'm just going to read a little bit of it here. Sometimes the things that may or may not be true are the things that a man needs to believe in the most. That people are basically good, that honor, courage, and virtues mean everything, that power and money and power mean nothing, that good always triumphs over evil, and I want you to remember this: love, true love, never dies. Doesn't matter if any of this is true or not. You see, a man should believe in these things because these are the things worth believing in. A lot to that movie. Go ahead and watch it sometime. But that little speech captures that what you believe in is more about a choice than it is about the content. I don't mean to say that what we believe about God and Jesus are not true. I believe they're true. But the important thing is not what's true or not, or what you can prove or not, or what is undeniably and arguably true, but what do you choose to believe, and how do you choose to live because of that? I think that's the lesson of the movie. I think maybe that's underlying some of the lessons we have in our readings. They do seem a bit thin. Habakkuk, the prophet, is concerned about the people because they've come back from exile and they're doing everything they can to live faithfully in the land that they've returned to, and still they suffer, and still they're oppressed by enemies. And Habakkuk is questioning God. What gives? We're doing everything you told us to. Why? Why are we suffering? I'm going to stand at the ramparts, and I'm going to watch, and I'm going to wait for the answer. And here's the thin answer that he gets. Look at the proud. Their spirit is not right in them, but the righteous will live by their faith. Period. I was looking for a little more. I don't know about you. I think Habakkuk was too. But it's the righteous will live by their faith. That's the message. A similar message in Timothy, to remember the faith passed down through his grandmother and his mother, to use that, to have courage, to continue to live faithfully, even though times maybe are against you and you don't see great reward in doing so. We don't do it because of the reward, we do it because it's right. And I think maybe that's how we understand the sort of odd lesson or parable that Jesus is teaching. I think our first impulse is, if somebody comes in from the field after having served us, we want to say, here, have some food, let me take care of you. That's what we all normally do. But Jesus is talking about the relationship between a master and a slave or a servant. And they have roles, and you fulfill those roles. So the servant comes in from the field and immediately feeds the master, and then eventually they get their food. And the whole point is, you don't pat yourself on the back and say, well, I did a good day's work today, good for me. No, you say, I'm just doing my job. And the way that's translated, it says, we are worthless slaves. It really, you could translate it, we haven't done anything that deserves a reward. We aren't due anything else. So we don't have faith because we get something for it. We trust God because that's the way we've been called to live. That's how it all makes sense. We live in a time when there's lots of challenges. There's a kind of competing narrative that the way to get ahead in the world is to amass a great deal of wealth or power. At our level, we think if we buy stuff, that'll make us okay. But at a kind of meta level, the idea that billionaires have the answers, so we should listen to them. And there's this kind of insidious, in other places of faith, they have this idea called Christian nationalism, which I think is neither Christian nor very patriotic. But it's the idea that God has chosen select few men who have great skills, and they should be our masters, and we should knuckle under and just get used to it because that's the way it is. I think that's a false narrative and a false faith, and it's really based out of a kind of bluster and fear, and it's quite empty. Instead, the way that we're called to trust Jesus is to let go of things, to be servants to one another and to God, to not try to achieve and dominate and control, but instead to let God control and to trust where God is leading us, even if it's into a place where we don't understand or we're not quite sure of the outcome. We may not be sure of the outcome, but we're sure about God, and God will eventually take us to a place where we need to go, and God will fulfill us and make us be the people we need to be. So increase our faith. Funny how when you ask God to do something, God gives you the opportunity to learn just that. So if we want our faith to be increased, God's going to put into our lives many occasions where we have to trust because we don't know. Is that what we asked for? Well, thankfully, we don't have to figure out what to do with mulberry trees. I don't even know what those look like. But the idea that we serve, we know how to do that. Maybe what Jesus and God are asking us to do is not some extraordinary thing, but just to continue to do the things we already know we should do. To love one another, to look out for the poor, to be a voice for those who have no voice, to take care of our neighbors, even the ones we don't like. Those are the things Jesus has asked us to do. That's what faith demands of us. Not that we believe terribly impossible things, but that we act on what we do know, and to act in love. And that's enough. Amen.